All right. Um, and by the way, I don't mind if anyone does have a question. You can go ahead and unmute and speak up. In fact, I kind of prefer that rather than just listening to my voice the whole time. Um, so just wanted to let you know I could either respond to chats or verbal questions. Okay, so digital learning objects for library instruction. Let's start with what are digital learning objects. And LibGuides are great. I just did a search and found a good definition on this LibGuide from Marquette University. Learning objects are digital materials, which could include videos, websites, or interactive tutorials with defined instructional value that can be used in a variety of ways to improve teaching and learning. So I see that as being a very broad definition. It can be anything from a full-blown interactive tutorial to being a LibGuide to being even an image if it's used, if it has instructional value and it's used for teaching and learning. And by the way, I have been using the abbreviation or acronym DLO to mean Digital Learning Object. So if you see that, the DLO on here, that's what I mean. Okay, since the theme of this conference is a seat at all tables, I wanted to begin by expressing my appreciation for having a seat at several tables because that has really led to the idea for this project and for my able to affording me the time to work on this topic. First, I do teach a credit course, Lib 101, Introduction to Library and Online Research. Right now, I'm teaching it online. I've also have served on a number of faculty committees, including our curriculum committee, and most recently, course of record development committees. And in the course of record is like a standardized online course where anyone here at the college, any faculty who are going to teach the course online have to use the course of record course shell if they're going to teach it. So it really is a huge development process with disciplined faculty, and they've started including a librarian in each of those committees. So that was really the genesis of this. I started seeing the need for better library instructional materials that actually fit right in with the class and with the curriculum. And with that idea, I applied for a sabbatical last fall and got it. And so I spent time in my sabbatical project working on this. So that was, to me, that was a huge privilege to be able to do that, and I'm really grateful for that. So on my sabbatical, my plan was to plan and create online learning objects to facilitate library instruction for information literacy and research skills. I left it kind of broad because I learned a lot as I was studying this. So I did a lot of research. I researched different principles for creating these learning objects and best practices. I did training on different software tools. I uh, created some samples, and the main activity was to formulate a plan for intentional development of learning objects. Everyone seems to have hit and miss. You know, there's a need comes up or someone's interested, they create a video, we put it up. They're kind of scattered. They don't go together. They don't have a plan. So the idea was to really be more intentional about creating these learning objects. So one of the first things I did was try to wrap my head around the totality of what this meant, the different sources that are out there, the different types of learning objects, the different needs that we have. And it really fell together once I started picturing it in three different camps or three different groups or formats of types of objects. We have three different purposes in mind. First is the tailored library instruction for a specific course. So that would be more like the full-blown tutorial. Oh, and someone asked how long the sabbatical was. It was 1 semester. It was the fall semester 2024. Um, and that's really what I started out. That was my focus. But as I started looking, I realized it is much broader, and I had to look at some other things as well. Um, so So with the tailored library instruction, course-aligned tutorials, video demonstrations, and then also we have a need for how-to help. And you want a very different format for how-to help. Someone who wants to know how to request a book to be sent from another library does not want to sit through a long video and, take a tutorial and do a little practice quiz on it. They just want to know how, be shown how and apply it right away. So explainers, which could be a brief video or animations or pop-ups, might be more appropriate for that kind of need, that purpose. And then a third purpose was the awareness of available resources. So this could be something like a marketing video, but more often it's like a LibGuide. And I see the LibGuides as starting points. They go to a LibGuide. The LibGuide itself is a learning object, but it also could include other learning objects like a tutorial or some explainer videos could be embedded in LibGuides. Now I have on here aligned with new St. Louis Community College pathways. Our college is going through or just went through a whole reorganization of all the departments and divisions into groups called pathways or schools. And so with that whole reorganization, we are reorganizing all of our LibGuides to align with those. And so to do better curriculum alignment with those was all part of this project. As I said, the planning process is the real focus here. And I did create this, I call it DLO planning guide for the staff here to use. And basically, most of the slides in my presentation are a summary of what's in this guide. I used the ADDIE model of instructional design. I looked at several other models. I felt like ADDIE was more flexible, could be applied to a lot of these different formats. There are other things like backwards design, which is great and can be used with ADDIE even for doing the actual lesson plans and tutorials in classes. But ADDIE could be used for that and can also be used for some of the shorter, the videos, the other types of digital learning objects. So again, this is a guide. Should not be followed as a rigid series of steps. And not all the questions I came up with are applied to every project. Some may need to be revisited at later parts. In fact, I mentioned to an instructional designer that I'm on one of these core teams with, that I was doing a presentation about the ADDIE process, and he laughed and he said, "Oh, we call that ADDIE. And it's you go through all the ADDIE steps, and then you go back and do the DIE over and over again. So it is iterative. So these are the ADDIE steps or phases: analyze, design, develop, implement, and evaluate. The analyze step is where you identify your needs. There are several different ways to do this. You could do things like surveys, but you might just want to look at what are your existing gaps? What do you not have yet? Or even what already exists that you don't need to replicate that. You want to instead look at what doesn't exist. So like, what is the difference between a magazine and a journal? We get that a lot. And there's this really nice tutorial. I'm hoping this follows. And no, it's not. Oh, there it is. Okay. Can you see that? Can I just get a thumbs up or something in the chat that you can see a new screen? No, are you still just seeing my PowerPoint? We can see it. Okay. Okay, so for example, North Carolina State University Library has this great scholarly and popular materials page that's really good at with the images and spelling out the differences and including trade magazines. And, I just think this is a really nice one. They have a lot of other stuff too. So I might not want to replicate this because it already exists. Let me close that now and go back to my PowerPoint. And okay. So look for the existing gaps. Also, what are the common questions? You might want to check your chat logs or check if you do reference questions via email, check and see what common questions come up on email or at the reference desk, or we call it our research help desk. What are the questions that you get all the time? Those might be the things where you need to create a learning object. Also think of faculty requests, of course. If there's a faculty member who's teaching a course and they want you to create something for their course, that goes right up there to the top of the needs. And of course, there are way too many needs than there are to easily create things for. You can't meet everyone's needs all the time. So then you need to prioritize and choose the projects to work on. First, are there any that are urgent? This might be a faculty request. This might be the course is starting in the beginning of the fall semester. You need to have the tutorial finished by the beginning of the fall semester. So, the urgency. And then think about what will have the greatest reach or the greatest impact. What are those courses where they really need information literacy concepts covered? English composition, of course, but there might be others as well. Or what reaches the greatest number of students? Also, what is doable given the time that you have, the training requirements, and what kind of development tools that you have access to. These are all things to ask yourself when you're analyzing. After the analyze stage comes the design stage, and some basic questions to ask are, who is the primary audience? It's easy to say students, but which students? Is this freshman composition classes? Is this for more advanced students? Or are you making something for faculty or, for other audiences? What are the intended goals and outcomes? And then you think about what format you might use. Again, that's based on what you have available and what you have training for sometimes. And then the context. Will this be embedded in a course or in a research guide like a LibGuide? Is it part of a series or is it a standalone? So these are all things to think about, again, as you're just getting started with design. And I also wanted to mention that when I say design, I see the word design and I think of, oh, what colors and what font and what to put on it. And really that's not design. That's the development stage, which comes a little bit later. Design is more of a pre-planning of really getting everything ready to start putting it together. So another thing to think about in design are, what are your learning objectives? I had mentioned you need to know what outcomes and what's the purpose, but learning objectives gets to be a little bit more specific. And again, with some of the brief explainer videos, it could be a simple statement of, here we need a video that shows students how to request a book from another library. So that would be your objective, that students would be able to request a book from another library. But if you're doing a tutorial and you're embedding it in a class, you really need to think a little bit deeper about what learning objectives, what will the learners be able to do, explain, or demonstrate. And generally, you'll want to look at Bloom's taxonomy to when you're wording your objective. So for example, if I were doing a tutorial about scholarly journals and popular magazines, this might be my learning objective. After completing this tutorial, students will be able to distinguish between scholarly journals, popular magazines, and trade publications. We also have to consider how learners will achieve this and how will learning be assessed. Let me go on though, because I highlighted the word distinguish in the learning objective, because in Bloom's taxonomy, distinguish is at the analyze level. The remember level is memorize, identify, recalling information. Then you go up to understand. The students might need to explain or summarize or describe. Then you go on up to application, and then you get to the higher order thinking um, um, levels of Bloom's taxonomy. And the verb that you use in the learning object is really what puts it at that level. And the reason I'm spending time on this, and there are whole presentations you could do on Bloom's taxonomy, whole books and everything. But I think it is important to consider, because if you're doing this for a course, you need to make sure that the verb that you use in your learning objective is at the right level and is not at a higher level than the learning objective for that particular lesson or that particular unit or that particular course. So you want to make sure that it aligns and that it fits within or underneath the objectives for the course. Okay. Oh, still in the design phase. What are some additional considerations? Well, first, who is going to do this? A team is good rather than an individual, especially if you're doing a whole tutorial. But also think about additional stakeholders beyond the library. Do you want to work with a faculty member? Do you want to work with your academic support and tutoring center or your writing center on campus? And think about who else needs to be involved in the development. What technologies, software, and skills will be needed, create a timeline, and what are some of the necessary steps that go into your timeline. You might want to set some internal deadlines along the way. And then, of course, budgeting. What are the costs? It's really easy to overlook staff time, and especially staff time for training. It could take a lot of time to learn some of these software tools. It's not always a matter of just sitting down and putting something together. Okay, now the fun part, develop. This is the actual creation phase. This is where you get to do some of the more fun stuff, I think. But there are some things to consider. First of all, the writing style. All the research that I've done, these themes came up over and over again. Keep your writing style simple. Make it clear for your intended audience. Avoid library jargon and technical terms. If you do use library jargon and technical terms, sometimes you can't avoid them, but explain them in that case. Always put it in terms that your audience will understand. Avoid cognitive overload. Don't hit them over the head with too much information, dense text, too much on the screen, too much busyness. Really keep it simple is the overall theme here. And then I have a couple of websites. I'm trying to keep it simple. There's lots and lots online about plain language writing and about writing for the web. But this one kind of surprised me. This is actually a government resource, a federal government resource, and it's meant for government employees, plain language writing web tips. And I think it's one of the best that I've seen that really spells out how to write well for the web and actually for any kind of learning materials that you have. So I just think that's a great source that I'd recommend. Let me go back to my PowerPoint here. Oops, I'm lost there. Also think about branding when you think about the look and feel. So you probably want to put your library's logo or your institution's logo on it. You might want to have a standard opening and closing slide for all of your videos. Um, so that's something else to consider and to get put together. And this is just another fun one I like, this coolers. If you're looking for a color palette, um, I just discovered it. Again, there's lots and lots of stuff on the web about web design, and I certainly didn't do an exhaustive survey of them. But this one was new to me, where you can create color palettes, and you can even do things like upload a photograph, and it'll build a palette from the photograph, and you can kind of see what colors go well together. It's, kind of a fun one that, like I said, I hadn't heard about before. Close that. Back to my PowerPoint. Okay. Accessibility, of course, is very important. And again, I could do a whole presentation just on accessibility, just on what I've learned, and I'm not an expert, but I have learned a lot about accessibility. And we use a lot of tools and platforms that have built-in accessibility features, but they are not accessible unless you use them correctly. So for example, we have a lot of LibGuides, and LibGuides are built on pages, and then the pages have boxes, and then you can put in different heading levels under the boxes. So the title of the page is heading level 1. The box title is level 2, and then you could put in a heading 3 to set off a paragraph or a list or something like that. We had some of our librarians here in the past had decided they liked the look of the heading 3, and they would hide the box name and then put like a whole sentence as heading 3 at the top. And it might look nice on the page, but it really breaks the accessibility because the screen reader is navigating by those headings. And if the headings aren't what it expects, it can really throw the person off. So heading levels are very important. Color contrast is also important for people with low vision or color blindness. Putting in alt text for images, using transcripts or captions for videos. There's so much in there about accessibility. And again, I just put one site. There's lots of sites, but WebAIM is one site that really clearly spells out ways to incorporate accessibility into different websites and into different formats. So this is the main page, but if you go to their resources page, they have some other popular resources, including evaluation tools, contrast checkers. You can do a lot with this to check and make sure that your site is accessible. Okay. Okay, inclusiveness. Um, I attended a couple of great sessions this morning on inclusiveness, and so that was really good. But just consider inclusiveness. Think about your objectives, your information sources in any visual images and examples that you use. Keep inclusiveness in mind as you're choosing those. This is just a photo that I picked up in Pexels. I think I did a search for something like multicultural students, and this came up. Oh, copyright. Copyright is a big thing. Of course, you need to follow copyrighted licensing guidelines. Creating your own original material is the safest bet, or using items that are in the public domain, looking for Creative Commons licensing, and of course, using the attribution or if that's required by the Creative Commons, making sure you abide by whatever restrictions they put on it. But also think about some of the material in your library databases. Your licensing agreement may or may not allow you to use material from your databases in learning objects, and it might make a difference in whether you're creating a learning object that will be embedded in an LMS, a learning management system like Canvas or Blackboard, or whether it's out on the open web. I know that several of our databases do allow us to use their materials if it is embedded in courseware in our LMS, but not on the open web, of course. You wouldn't want to do that. But check that, because you might have access to more things than you think you do, depending on your use. Fair use can be problematic because the guidelines are not always clear. But, if all else, if you have something that is under copyright, it may be that your use would fall under fair use. But then also consider whether, when you create your learning object, consider whether you want to share it under Creative Commons license. I think it's a good idea to do that and maybe make it a standard for your library. Okay, still developing. The last stage of developing is testing and feedback. A lot of students, a surprising number of students, are trying to take online classes with only their phones. So much as we can tell them not to do that, don't rely on just your phone, we still want to make sure that they can look at things on their phone, test different browsers, test different devices, different size screens, test from off and on campus, different, well, I said different browsers already. Just make sure that it works in all these different ways that people might connect to it. Also, get someone else to proofread and check for errors. You can't really proofread your own work. You know what it's supposed to say, and your eyes just kind of slide right by it. So it's best to have more pairs of eyes on it. Get feedback from your colleagues, from the stakeholders. Again, I'm thinking faculty here, but also from the target audience. If you're creating something for students, you want to make sure the students understand it and see what they have to say about it before you implement it more widely. Of course, implementation, back to the I in ADDIE. So then, how will you deploy this? Do you need approval or permission? So for example, if I were developing something for those core classes that I mentioned, there is a faculty leader there's a whole core committee, and then after it's developed, there's a faculty leader, and they would need to approve anything before it's deployed. Maybe you have a marketing team or someone on your staff who needs to approve what you put up on the library website. Where will you store it? Who will have access to the original? Who can go in and make changes? Who can pull it up and use it in other places even? You want to protect your original. How might you market it? Who's responsible for maintaining it? That's a big one, especially when it comes to LibGuides. There are a lot that it's hard to keep up with all of them. And then also consider whether or not you want to include contact information for users to ask questions or to make comments. All right, after implement, we're not done yet. Now we have to evaluate. And I really want to make the point here that there are two kinds of assessment, two kinds of evaluation. One is the assessment of student learning. So that's where you need to assess according to the learning objectives that you set out. So for a lesson, assess the level of student learning. But then you also need to assess your project, your object itself. How How will you determine the impact and effectiveness of the learning object? One measure of that is how successful students are, but also maybe how widely it's been adopted, how much it's used, usage data, um, or even, what other feedback that you get about it. So think about how you'll gather that information and how will you share and communicate the assessment data and how will you use it to improve? Because just gathering the data isn't enough. You have to use it. There's no sense gathering it if you're not going to use it. As I mentioned, it's an iterative process. So the evaluation stage could be part of the analyze stage for developing the next learning object or updating it or the next iteration, the next round. So remember that ADDIE, die. You could go through the whole thing and then just go back to the development stage and redo or start all over again with a new project. So that's all of ADDIE, but I also wanted to get into some of, sorry, checking my time. I tend to run out of time, but I went through that. Oh, go back one slide. I'm not sure how long ago you asked that, so let me go back. Was it this slide?
This one, I just needed to write down the last part
Okay.
there.
Well, I will
Yeah.
share the slides. So, okay. Okay. Is that enough?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Okay. So back to, all right. I looked at a lot of software and tutorial creation tools. Um, there's so much out there. I did not do an exhaustive search of ed tech tools. There are so many out there. I tried to stick with the ones that I have access to and that we have access to at St. Louis Community College that I could get a group of staff here to use. So think about that. Think about what you have readily available. Maybe there are things that are already purchased and supported by your institution and that are integrated with your LMS. So I wanted to mention Canva first. I am not a Canva expert, but we have people on staff who are, who can create wonderful images and things with Canva and, use them. That's a great resource to have to get that, all of the visual stuff. But also consider productivity suites that you might use every day, like the Microsoft Office tools, everything from PowerPoint to um, um, uh, I'm sorry, Google Slides, PowerPoint. There's just a lot built in that you can use to create your objects without going out to these other tools out on the web. Also, if you have LibGuides, you can do so much with LibGuides, and LibWizard, of course, is the SpringShare tutorial software, and LibWizard is really a great tool if you're used to using LibGuides because it's so easily integrated into your LibGuides. So that is a great one to get to know and to use. If you're doing videos, ScreenPal has a free level. So it's the one that I saw used most often as far as free. It also has paid level, but you can do quite a bit with the free level, I understand. Clipchamp is something I wasn't really aware of until recently, and Clipchamp is actually part of this Microsoft 360. So you might already have access to it and not even realize it. It's a video, what's the word? Video editing software. St. Louis Community College has a subscription to Panopto, and Panopto is integrated into Canvas, our courseware. So I did a lot of training on using Panopto. It's not free. It's not one that you can just go out and use. It takes a little bit of training. And it has some other limitations, but it has the advantage for me in that it is already in Canvas. I don't even have to open it separately. If I'm creating something from my course, I can just create it inside my course in Canvas, or I can send it to instructors to use in their courses in Canvas. And it will do things like you can create chapters and just do a lot with the video editing in Panopto. And I put YouTube on there. A lot of people use YouTube as a place their um, to store their videos and give access because students find them and use them readily on YouTube. But did you know that you can actually do a little bit of editing right in YouTube for free? You don't even have to get other software. If you open up YouTube, this links to YouTube's help page for trimming and cutting your videos. So it's not real fancy. You can't do a lot, but you can cut out the awkward beginning and end and maybe even some spots in the middle. And it says you can add in screens and do some other things. I have to admit, I haven't really used this myself, but it's just good to know that it's there out there on YouTube. And then tutorial software besides LibWizard, that H5P is one that I think if I were not here at St. Louis Community College where we have adopted SoftChalk, I would probably want to dig deeper into H5P. All of these have a learning curve. I really liked the tutorials that I saw and created with H5P. It's slide based and flexible and looks modern and clean. So I was really impressed with it. But I saw that you needed a little bit. When I tried to just look at the help to learn how to do it on my own with no training or anything, it was not something I could just jump right into. And then Articulate came up a lot too. That's also one that a lot of institutions will purchase. And then, as I said, SoftChalk is what we have. And I made this is a note to myself to talk about SoftChalk integration. One thing that I discovered about SoftChalk since St. Louis Community College has purchased the SoftChalk subscription and we've integrated SoftChalk into Canvas. In one of the training sessions, I found out that in SoftChalk, I could actually create a SoftChalk tutorial. They call them lessons. I could create a lesson. I could make it scoreable, assign points, share it with instructors who could embed it in Canvas in their courses and change the points to whatever they want. And it integrates directly with their gradebook, which is fine. But I could also collect statistics on how it was being used and get aggregate data on scoring. And for me, that meant that SoftChalk was the one I really needed to work on for these tutorials. So if you don't have that, it's an institutional thing. SoftChalk had some drawbacks too. I think it looks a little clunky. It is not easy to use. There's quite a learning curve. Uh, I don't think it's as flexible, as easily shareable as H5P. H5P is used in a lot of open educational resources, so I know you can put it out in those. SoftChalk, I don't think you can do that as much. It lives on the SoftChalk website and you link to it. You can't really save extra copies of it yourself. So it's a little bit different. It has those limitations. So a few examples. First, and I have to admit, I don't have a full-blown finished tutorial on SoftChalk. I have I have some example things that kind of show what it does. This one is just a simple little one page that I actually use in my Lib 101 class. So I have it embedded in Canvas and it has a frame around it, or I let students link directly to it if they'd prefer. But what this does is it uses an iframe, and I would not use this on an open website because I'm going out to another institution's page, but in my class, I wanted to use this, and this is just an iframe embedded link to this page on the information cycle. It has this nice infographic, and it also has the text version on here, so it's accessible. And then I made sure that if they had problems with the links, they could get to it through other links if they had problems with the iframe. And then SoftChalk lets you do these little embedded things like here's an activity where I can put these in the order that they come out and then check my answers. And I got a bunch of them wrong and I can redo it and do them again. I could have also set this up not to let people redo it and integrate it into the grade book and collect a score. So, um, little things like that. And yes, you can embed this in Canvas. You can embed the activities in here separately, or you can embed the lessons into Canvas. So this is just one example. And then, let me go back. Here's another example that is a multi-page lesson. Exploring topics for research. I was asked to create this from English 101 for the core course. They're not using it yet, so this is for the future revision to the core course. And so this is just my opening page. You can use the Get Started button, or you can go to a particular page. I'll just go to Get Started. And so you can see here's the first page, research is a process. Again, I've got my table of contents, or I can use the page numbers, or I can go to next. And I embedded a video in here from Credo reference on refining a topic. So since this would be embedded in a class, our students would already be authenticated and should be able, and it should open up Credo reference, open up the video right away from that. It's going slow today, so I'm not going to wait for it. And anyway, so it can only be used, again, I would not put this out on a website. It's for embedding in a class in Canvas. But just so you can see what you can do with it. You can do a lot of things and set up these multiple pages to create these lessons in SoftChalk. And last, searching is similar. I had some other types of activities there. But I want to go to the SoftChalk Cloud because that is where I actually do the work. So what I see, I'm already logged in. I go to my content. The objects, like those little interactive things, can be stored separately and also embedded in lessons. So I'll go to lessons. And so that exploring topics for research, this is what it looks like from my end. I could do a preview where I'd see what it looks like when I send people the link. It lets me get the hyperlink if I'm just sharing this out on the web, or this is what I put on the PowerPoint slide. It gives me an LTI link for in Canvas or another learning management system. It gives me the embed code if I want to embed it in one of those, or anywhere. I could embed it in a LibGuide too, but I would do it differently if I were going to do that. It has all of these other choices. And when I go in to edit the lesson itself, then it looks even different, but this is where I can go in and change things, put in page breaks. It gives me like the different types of activities that I can add. There's really a lot on here that you could do. As I said, I think it looks a little clunky. It's not quite as flexible as I'd like, but there is a lot. And being able to include things that are scored and that faculty can actually um, use too, these little quizzes. Um, so quiz popper, they call them a quiz popper. You could do little one question quizzes. Um, multiple multiple blanks is nice. You can take a section and do a multiple blank and choose particular words where they have drop down and choose. Just lots of little interactive things like that. Okay, so I see that getting close to the end of my time. If you have any questions, type them in the chat. I have a couple more slides, but they're really just ending kind of an ending here. Oh, I forgot to mention too, with the LibGuides, we did a complete reorganization of our research guides, and we're in the middle of a complete reorganization of our research guides and making better use of the built-in subject guides. We have LibGuides, is it CMS? And which allows us to create groups. So this is how our old subject page for health professions, this is how it looked. And then the new one for the new School of Health Professions, the new pathway, instead of just having the list, we created a guide for that with its own banner, and all of the School of Health Professions will have the same banner. And then we have the research guides in here as a widget, and then databases. This isn't live, so I can't go to it. But that's just how these are going to look. Um, challenges. There were a lot of challenges to this. During my sabbatical semester, the consortium that we belong to, Mobius, had a complete migration of the whole shared library catalog, which meant our local library catalog, our discovery layer processes, including things like how to request books. They all changed during that semester. There are a lot of glitches and problems with the process. So I would create a little video on how to do this and there'd be a glitch, or I would create it and the next day it would look different. So that was a problem. Um, database interfaces change all the time, of course. We had our whole department reorganization, and we are doing a website redesign. And artificial intelligence has made such a huge impact, and it has implications not just for, citing, that comes up a lot, hallucinations, but also even in the way that we search and the way that we evaluate, so that we need to reconsider the way that we teach searching and the way that we teach evaluating. So we'll have to do a lot of thinking about that, about how that changes really what students need to know. And then, of course, limited time, keep it skills. Limited time and skills are another big challenge. My most valuable insights, I think, were to be flexible when dealing with those challenges, keep learning, work on skills. Time is also an issue, and also collaborate. I started out trying to do a lot of this on my own, but you really do need a team. You need people who work together and bounce ideas off each other, and it really helps to have a team. Oh, the resources. I did include links that these are some of the same links that I had earlier. And then I really recommend these three sources at the top. I'll just go on from there. And then my guide, I've linked it again here. Okay, so questions. Let me take a look at the chat. I see people are using Articulate's Rise product and Storyline. Yeah, it looked cool to me too, but it's not my institution went with SoftChalk, so that's the one I concentrated on. I didn't really look deeply into Rise. Thank you for sharing your guide on for Rise. Knowledge checks and quizzes, but no one can see the results. Okay, so that is an advantage SoftChalk has. Um, and I haven't quite learned how to do that. I mean, I know how to embed it in my course as an assignment and have it integrate with my gradebook, but I haven't quite figured out. They have something called a score center, and I haven't quite figured out yet how to deploy that to other faculty and collect the statistics. So that's kind of next on my agenda to do.